Hello everyone. This is a message from a recent channeling that Gail Clark and I did. So during this channeling, a being came to us, an Archurian that we've named Z from the 7th dimension. And I didn't know how to pronounce her name, so I just called her Z based on the light code that she was showing me. And here's an image of that. So this being came to us for the purpose of informing us that her and their kind are bringing 7th dimension light codes to upgrade humans to their original form, with this kind of understanding that, we have been genetically modified for eons of time, and that our original form, our God-given gifts have been very suppressed. And so she started to show me her form, what she looked like. She was much taller than us. She herself was what I would call like an ambassador for her kind, or the 7th dimension beings. And she had like a larger, like a longer, taller head and eyes that were kind of slanted upward. And then her skin was like a whitish, but it could go translucent. She was kind of showing me this. And then I actually, during channeling, said, well, you kind of have resemblance to a praying mantis. And she said, well, that's one of the kinds that we came from. So meaning that when her kind was made, it was a mixture. And she said her grandfather very much looked like a praying mantis type. And so then she started to show me like 2 different types of earth. And she was saying, we actually came from a place that looks similar to yours. It almost felt like her kind was like made from different beings. They lived on a place like Earth, but then she said, similar to Earth, that place had been degraded over time. And she said that the other beings came in to save them. And when they did, they were brought back to their original form with their spiritual gifts and higher abilities. And she said now that they had been saved and brought back to their original form, it was kind of like their job, or her job as an ambassador, to come through to humanity from the 7th dimension to this dimension to assist us with upgrades on Earth, and specifically to the human body, of coming back to its original form. And so she did keep indicating, like bringing forth light codes to open us back up to our original form. So then she said to us, well, do you want to go there? Meaning the 7th dimension. And so I'm multi-dimensional, and so I often astroplane out of my body, or remote view. This specifically was, astroplaning. And so she took us to her ship, and she was indicating, like, even here on Earth, how, there's planes, and then there's like jets, and what we were entering would be more like a jet. It was like it was a pod. It looked like a pod. There was a driver, but the inside of it was more circular, and it was like a orangish, soft, glowing light inside. It was very cozy. We did get strapped down, and then she said she was clearing our energy. So I went into a lot of like toning and chanting. She was clearing our energy, saying we couldn't travel to the 7th dimension with how our body was at that time. And so she said she was working on our bodies. And then after that, and during this channeling, I could not move at all because I was strapped down like energetically, in this pod. And we began to travel from this dimension to the 7th dimension. going through the sixth dimension, and it was very, sorry, that's my dog. It was very dark. There was a lot of distorted energies in the sixth dimension. I did see a black hole, and she said that as we traveled, she was placing a lot of protection, like white light over us, so we could make it from this dimension to that dimension. Then once we got to the seventh dimension, it's like, it was, okay, the only words I have to describe it were like, something like, oh, that movie, what's that movie? Yes, Avatar. It was kind of like Avatar. Like we stepped off of this pod, and it was like we were floating in air, but there was like nature all around. It was beautiful, and it was so vast and beautiful that I was so full of emotion. I just started crying because it was so much. And then I was introduced to, some of you might have heard of this type of being that looks like a praying mantis. And there was this like ginormous, huge being that looked like a praying mantis. And she kept calling it grandfather. And I was so, the presence of this being was so divine that I couldn't hardly look at him. And I was kind of like frozen. And, he reassured me it's okay. And there was so many different types of beings in the seventh dimension. And it was so full of love. I didn't even know what to do with it. So then we spent some time there in the seventh dimension. And there was like a lot of downloads just about the history of humanity, the history of her kind, the history of humans being like modified for power and control by reptilians, and the purpose of the seventh dimension light codes coming in to upgrade our bodies so that we can be more in our light gifts. And so with that, many of you who are upgrading are going to be experiencing so many shifts in your spiritual gifts, your abilities, and coming back to your original form. And then I'm kind of jumping ahead. This was in a different channeling, and usually our channelings last about like an hour, sometimes 2 hours. But in the following channeling, we were shown a mountain on the right lower side of Greenland along the edge of the water. And Z was guiding this remote viewing and showing me that this space in Greenland, this mountain, was being occupied by military, but it was actually shadow government military, because on top of the mountain there's a portal that other beings come in from other dimensions. But this portal had kind of been like overtaken, and darker entities from the sixth dimension were coming in, and you might call them like reptilians. And so we did a lot of work over that space in Greenland. So if you feel like sending healing energy over that space, we were told to like make this known, because there was so much control over that space by military personnel that there was just lots of distortion, and then it made it difficult for the seventh dimension beings to come through clearly. So we did a lot of healing over that space. You want to be a part of this? Ozzy helps channel energy, don't you? Yeah, you help clear the energy. So in a different channeling, now I'm kind of putting a lot of channelings together because I haven't posted in a while. In a separate channeling, we did see that in 2028, and I'll have to go back and listen to get the specific month, but in 2028, we saw a courtroom with different members of different countries in the courtroom, but there were extraterrestrials there as part of the meeting. Multi-dimensional beings, yes. And so that time is coming.